So I want to thank everybody for joining us tonight for this lovely evening of sharing digging tricks with the community. My name is BChang, and I'd like to get started by saying digging is a slang term used to describe how DJs found tracks in the old days, right? They would go through an old record store. They would thumb through all the different records. They would get what's called dusty fingers, for some of you guys that remember what that means. They'd find their, the very select few that they were willing to fork over pretty good money for at the time, right? Maybe later on that week, those DJs would be found in a dark warehouse somewhere, pulling out those tracks. DJs and dancers alike would be moved by kind of their rare finds. DJs were and still are considered tastemakers, all thanks to the meticulous digging for the cream of the crop, the best of the best, the truly unique, and the yet-to-be-discovered hits of the dance floor. We have here our panelists, and it's an accomplished, talented group of people in our community who want to share their tips for track searching and track selection. Unlike typical panels, we invite the audience to also share stories and strategies on their own if they feel like there's something that can add to it. All right, so I'm going to introduce our panelists. We'll start with Natalie here on my left. Want to welcome her back to our family. It's been about 5 or 6 years now since you graduated from our curriculum. So you're looking at a graduate. She's done the whole vinyl test and everything. She's one of the students that we're very proud of.
Thanks.
So she's carved out quite an impressive DJ career over the last few years. She's graced the stages of Exchange LA, Time Nightclub, and the Groove Cruise real recently, right? Mm-hmm. I did my research. And she's also held down several residencies, including Deep House Brunch and newest with True House LA, right?
Yes.
Cool. Awesome. We're excited to see her growth in her career and her next moves. So everyone, welcome Natalie.
Thanks, guys. Couldn't have done it without DMI.
Felipe. What's her station? What?
Red 5.
Yes. Thank you. All right. Next, I'd like to introduce the esteemed Taboo, a.k.a. Mr. Wendell, a.k.a. Wendell Noel. Some of you might have remembered he gave a kind of a talk with one of our classes over a year ago in October, where he shared some tips on transitioning and drop timing. And he gave us examples both with house music or four-on-the-floor music and drum and bass, and how it might differ across vinyl and digital. So we got a nice little kind of demonstration from him a year ago. He's an accomplished DJ with over 25 years of experience behind the decks and is dialing in his progressive house sound under his Mr. Wendell project. He's been extremely supportive of DMI over the years, and he's a true ambassador of dance music culture. So we'd love to really thank Wendell for joining us today. And lastly, we have Holiday Panasith, a.k.a. the leader of I Am Terrain, which is a top-notch group of selectors and curators of that deep, progressive sound. So starting off in the late 90s, he's been honing both his skills and his sound. Holiday has held residencies both in San Francisco and LA, and has founded several collectives over the years, including Undercurrent, Deep Aura, and most recently, I Am Terrain. I can honestly say that his collective has some of the best selectors in our region. So it's really, really good stuff, and he knows how to find the good ones. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
All right. So without further ado, we're going to start with the questions. I'm going to start with Wendell. He's going to take us on a little trip back in time.
All right.
And to the days of digging with vinyl crates and record stores. I want you to kind of share your memories of it. Like, what did it feel like going to those record stores? What did it smell like? Was it kind of like a watering hole for local DJs, or was it like the competition where no one wanted to talk to each other?
It's a good question. So as far as what it smells like cardboard. Those are your record sleeves, everyone digging, microscopic dust particles of cardboard year after year through a record store. The vibe was always cool, whether it's this you and the owner, or you and a few other fellow DJs. There definitely always was camaraderie. And one thing I always loved was, at many occasions, there'll be someone spinning at the store. Someone will be playing, and you could get other people's vibes, see what they're dropping, see how they're playing, things like that. And of course, over the years, becoming one of those people that was playing at the record store while people are in there shopping. So to come full circle 360 with that is pretty cool as well. Now,
Which store is still doing that today?
Dr. Free Clouds here in Orange County. It's a must. Yes, it's a staple. I bought some of my very first records there, and it's definitely always going to be a bit of a home away from home. Ron and Helen holding it down for all these years, holding it together. And actually, I think they have an event coming up soon, don't they? Is it an anniversary?
I think so. I forget when their anniversary is, but I think it's like either January or February. It's coming up around the corner.
Yeah, so check them out, Dr. Free Clouds. Last record store standing.
I was about to ask what their tagline is.
That's what it is. That's what it is.
Cool,
Yes, yes.
Awesome. All right. So holidays, similar kind of vein of question. You also dug for records back in the day, right? What was it like being limited to only physical media compared to, an infinite supply of digital tracks that we use today? With the scarcity of records, and if you couldn't find something, like, what do you do?
Yeah, in San Francisco has been really interesting because it's one of those special places you go to where it's just like off-world. Everything in life, everything's off for a while. And then you go there to kind of get inspiration. You find white labels, which has been really, really cool to find, because then you'll get these B-sides and C-sides of tracks that are just really deep and rich. And it's always nice to hold the physical media, especially at this record store, because they had different types of cartridges. So they have Ordophons or Shure heads. So you get to see how the record sounded through different types of head shells. And then that also kind of affected the sound and how I was ingesting all these different types of melodies and stuff. And almost with white labels, I really enjoyed the most. Of course, had labels you really loved and you grew up listening to and collecting. But the white labels were really fascinating because you start realizing within yourself, as you're listening to these tracks, you'll pitch them down slower or faster, and you're just finding yourself doing these things. And you're listening to the audio and these songs that have been written in just how you're feeling. That's kind of the beginning of how I collect, because I'm hearing, okay, this sounds like an A key, and I used to carry this little chord guitar tuner, and I'm like, oh, what is this key? It's an A minor. Okay, oh wait, that's a G flat. Okay, interesting. And the more you pitch it down, the more keys it drops. So it was just really fun to hear all these things, and I'm just having a blast, just like in my own world, my own headphones, just listen to these tracks. I'm like, oh, that is kind of like a mid track to use in a slot. That's more of an opening. That's more like a global underground style. Like you want to start something slow and build into it. So just more things on how you can actually speak through your music and collect. So that's how I feel about physical media.
Right on. Cool. And then, yes.
What's a white label?
So a white label are typically tracks that are secret released, or they weren't really exactly in the pipeline for like making a hit or to kind of put out to the world, like on Juno or Jam.com or things like that. It was more like it was a tester. And so sometimes they made it if they picked up a lot of steam. And so a lot of DJs, when we got stuff, we take them and we go play like wherever, anything you think, house party, warehouse party, or whatever it may be. And you're testing them out. And then usually promo and A&R would go to these parties and they'll see people responding to it. And they kind of got a gauge on how many units it can make that way. So things typically worked so fast in the 90s because when you got a track and it was working, it usually would hit the shelves like in less than a week. Like people were getting it quick. So fascinating times.
So when you guys would make your record store trips, like how much money would you budget for the trip? Like how long would you have to save up to go to make it worth it? Tell us about like the buying aspect of it.
You know, depending on where we were going, and a lot of times it'd be, me, my lady at the time, sometimes it would be me, and like 4 or 5 of us, like just carpooling or convoying over to the record shops. There was Higher Source here in OC. And the thing is, if you're going to go to one, you create a route. So you hit as many as you can in one day. And just boom, 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 boom. As far as budget, try to keep it under $100,
And this is $100 what year money?
So that would get you like early, you spend like $7.99 to $8.99 for, a single. But then it got to the point where it's like, okay, now it's $12.99. Okay, now it's $13.99. Today is crazy. What you'll pay for a record right now.
Totally.
Totally worth it, but big change. But so yeah, I tried to keep it under 100. That rarely happened. But one thing I did want to mention was you asked about finding a tune, right? What do you do when you don't find a tune? But the first thing was we didn't have smartphones to say, this song, play. It's like you had to become a master at vocalizing music. Because you walk up to the guy at the counter and do you have that song that goes, I
love that one.
like, yeah, it's like old school hard house.
I know that one. It's a good one.
Exactly. Like you have to get it. You have to get it in a way that they know what song you're talking about. And outside of that, you just had to dig. You had to dig. You had to know the song had to be in there at some point. So you had to go frequently enough to catch those releases. Like there was a drum and bass track, Vinyl Syndicate Dub Plate Pressure Remix that came out. And I spent months looking for that record. And out of nowhere, it's like N2O Records. They had a little warehouse spot in downtown LA. And I was digging through the bins and I pulled out a bunch of stuff and I dropped it on. And there it was. Beep, boop, beep, beep, boop, beep, beep, boop, beep, beep. And it's like that feeling you get.
You got it.
When you put the needle down and what comes out is that song that you're looking for 3 months. Like there's nothing like that feeling at all. So
Awesome. And then Holiday, once you found one of your tracks, roughly how many plays would you get out of that track in a live scenario?
That's a good question. It depends because there's just some tracks that you just really identify with. So I typically collect in seasons on like how I'm responding to the seasons. So some tracks get a lot of play, and I realize the tracks that get a lot of play are the ones I call them setup tracks. So we're talking the first 6 tracks you would use in the mix, right? So I tend to play more of the setup tracks than I do the heavy stuff. And you would think you'd play more of the heavy stuff, right? But not every scenario calls for something heavy. And if you master collecting and listening and enjoying tracks that are like good setup tracks, you're able to kind of look at things and step up to the side, to the left or right, which is momentum. And you could see things and you can actually control the pace. Like if the crowd is like not quite all there yet, for example, or if you want to really express like the opening vibe, you can do so. And I tend to play more of those tracks, probably a little too much, but it's okay. It's fun. It's supposed to feel good. So
Right on. Cool. All right, Wendell, what was it like competing with other DJs for the same tracks? Did you ever have to hide the labels or block them out in order to prevent other DJs from train spotting?
that's a great question. I was never that guy. I didn't have time for that. I just wanted to get out there and play. If someone's gonna really like stare, which it happens, over the platter while the record's spinning and do this thing and like figure out what the record was, and so be it. I never covered my labels. To me, that's part of the fun. Train spotters are train spotters.
Totally.
Like, it is what it is.
Natalie, similar for you, but in the digital world, right? They're either looking at the screen or the laptop or whatever you're spinning on. Has that ever been an issue for you?
Yes, and it's funny because when I first started, I noticed that some DJs, actually a lot of them, they're kind of guarded with their music. So I became guarded myself as I was building a collection. I'm like, oh, now I have the bangers. I'm like, oh, I don't want to share my bangers. Like that's who I am. But once I started producing, it actually changed my mindset on it, because then I'm like, well, what if someone's like guarding my song and preventing other people from seeing it? So it's funny, when I started that actually allowed me. Now I'll just give it out. People come up almost every set, they're like, oh, I need this, or they show me the Shazam. I'm like, just take it. Like, music is meant to be shared.
Yes,
So.
absolutely.
Indeed.
And then when you post your mixes up online, do you take the time to write out the track IDs and everything?
I should do that.
It is time consuming. It is very time consuming.
It is. And a lot of songs, sometimes people send like unreleased tracks that like they specifically might tell you not to post, but for the majority, that probably is something good to do. But it does take a minute. Sometimes I'm so busy, I'm like, just put a mix out, I just gotta post it, and you gotta worry about the socials, and you gotta worry about everything. Like, it kind of slips in your mind, to be honest.
Yeah, fair enough.
But yes, you should do it. Like, I can go back and do that to all my mixes when I get home.
Cool. Holiday. What factors do you take into consideration when preparing a crate for a specific gig?
Crate for a specific gig.
Digital, vinyl, doesn't matter, just in general.
In general, it's, I guess that kind of goes back to how I put a playlist together. So it could be a playlist I've been sitting to play out for a while, or if it's something I'm really excited about, I'll kind of identify, usually there's 2 or 3 tracks that I just really resonate with. And I'll typically kind of take those tracks and I'll break them into segments within, like, if I'm playing a 2-hour set, I'll put like, okay, this is kind of a good leader for the opening. That's more for the mid. That's more for like the rally out, the big rally, right? So it's like, okay, well, then you start by digging or just kind of reflecting on your old collections. You'll say, how do I support those leads? And then I noticed when I was playing and listening to old recordings, I'm like, okay, so using that theory, it kind of like really accentuates different parts of the mix. And it's not tempo driven, because tempo is not energy. Like, content is energy. Dynamics is. I've heard really chill dub techno 100 BPM tracks are just lush, just sounds like an ocean, right? So going back to that, I always start with like a few tracks. Sometimes it's 1 or 2 tracks, and even then I'll know what keys I'm working with. So I'm very much guided by keys and dynamics of a track, and which one comes before which one, and how do I support those key tracks.
Right on. Cool. Natalie, you played a few gigs that are both pre-planned and mixed on the fly, right? How do you choose between each method for a particular gig? Like, just say you've got a gig on Friday and it's at this place. Do you go in saying, oh, that's a pre-planned gig? Oh, no, that's one I'm just going to kind of go with the flow. Like, how do you decide between those two methods, and what about the gig leads you to each method?
That's a great question. I would say going to the places you are playing at beforehand, seeing what kind of vibe is for your time slot especially is really important. Knowing who you're opening for. I love opening sets. I really think it's important to kind of, it's like the foreplay of the night, for lack of better expression. But
Totally.
I think, you're setting the vibe for the night too. So the bigger gigs I do have, I guess the nerves set in, and that's when I try to plan more. Like, I just played Time. I just opened for Dioro, and I actually stuck with the set the entire time, which is rare, because sometimes you're halfway through a pre-planned set, and the crowd might be wanting to go a little more energetic or less energetic, and sometimes you kind of just have to wing it if your pre-planned set doesn't work. I would say, my residency in Venice Beach, I've been playing there for almost 3 years. It's just kind of a party. I don't plan anything for that. It's just kind of watching what the crowd does. They get a little excited about disco, play more disco. It's kind of, you really have to pay attention to the crowd, to be honest. Understand what part of the night you're playing, because there's nothing worse than someone like banging it out right off the bat. I mean, it's not a good look.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. Question for the whole panel is, what sonic qualities do you look for in a track in order for it to make the cut? We'll start with Wendell.
So today I look for balance in frequency, and clarity and loudness. So that's something that, after listening to probably hundreds of thousands of songs, your ear knows right away what that balance is to you. Like I feel like everyone's gonna have their own balance of frequencies that resonates with them. I do some engineering, producing, mixing, mastering. So with that, there's a certain quality and balance that I'm looking for in the tunes that I've now identified to even stuff I've been buying for years. Like better understanding why I bought these tunes from a technical perspective.
Cool. So that sounds like a very kind of technical approach to it.
Right.
Who has some kind of more artistic or more subjective approaches to the sonic qualities that they like in the tracks?
Hi. I guess to answer that, it'd be more. I tend to put playlists together that really exemplify like places I imagine myself playing, which is kind of like what I am trained is mean. So I am, in the word I am means before my eyes is this terrain. And that's kind of the source of how I convey or what I gravitate towards too. Sometimes it's rhythm driven, or sometimes I'm just imagining where, if I'm like in Fiji, if I played a set in Fiji at like 8 p.m. or at midnight, what would that sound like? So that's my compass, and from there I fill in the set happens by itself. And you start finding relations between certain tones, and it also takes a level of commitment. So if you are just kind of too loose, and you're going back and forth between like a very rhythmic track to a very sharp kind of like, I don't know, techno, something like that, right? Which is all beautiful stuff, but the way you put those together, the concept has to be strong. And if the concept is strong, the sound is clear. And then with good handwork, whether it's a Pioneer mixer or Allen Heath mixer, I love all mixers. I prefer Allen Heath, but you can actually really sculpt out. So good handwork, clear sense of thought, and just committing to what you're going to go for. Always have a plan B too, just in case. But all that works is my process.
Cool. Felipe.
What do you mean by handwork?
So the question is, what do you mean by handwork?
So handwork is, we've all been through certain phases or seen people mix where they're very, they're hot in the mix. They like to snap them in just real quick, right? Which is cool. That there's a really, one of the best, DJ Shadow. A lot of cutting, Qbert, right? Then you look at Global Underground DJs and we're talking about like 3-minute, 4-minute transitions of just straight dynamic layering, right? So handwork would refer to whether you like using a rotary mixer, which is basically emulating the slow bleed, how you bleed a track in. EQ staging. So EQ staging is basically how much do you actually shave off the low end to make room for what you send in. I personally enjoy doing. I learned this like in the '90s, which is called the low snap. So if we're talking about a linear fader, right? You use a crossfader, you send it over, and then as you're listening to a track, you're going back and forth between cue or your monitor and seeing are the tones of each track equal or close to equal, or do you immediately pick up that the next track I'm going to send in is really bright, right? So I know I'm not going to go 12 o'clock on the high. I'm kind of geeking out here. Stop me if I am. So, let me do my thing.
Bring it.
So basically, handwork is how do you, from thought and picking up what you're hearing, you're able to set the track you're going to send in and know the threshold at the top of that as you do the low snap, which is basically a low snap is where you set the fader at 50% or 60%, and on the crossfader, on beat, you snap it right in the center. So what happens is that it ducks in way low, way subtle, and you have all that range to kind of bleed it up and send it back. Try that. You'll have fun with it. It's called the low snap.
Right on. Thank you so much.
May I simplify what he said?
Go for it.
I should get a
He's talking
chalkboard
about
and just draw
the
it out.
art of mixing.
Right. That's handwork.
Right on. Well, that's a good segue to having you explain something pretty complicated, or as it seemed to me when you described it. We had a conversation over the phone maybe a month or so ago, and you just shared with me your process of how you prepared for a particular gig that you had coming up. Kind of walk us through what you did for that particular one, and if that's like the norm, if that's special, or kind of your thought process behind it.
So, if I remember correctly, that was a drum and bass set. And the way I prepare for a drum and bass set is completely different from the way that I prepare for a four-on-the-floor house, techno, melodic, progressive type set. So with that one, the first thing for me is to essentially listen to everything. And that is the base of the work. So I will easily go through 10,000 plus releases in a week in preparation for, drum and bass set. And we were talking about, what am I listening for? So the first thing is knowing your sound or combination of sounds. So like, where is your range? And, Holiday touched on, finding his sound in both DJing and production earlier on. But it's like knowing what your culmination of sounds are. Because I feel it's pretty rare today that someone just plays one singular style. So in order to create a journey, I need a culmination of sounds that I feel gel together and then collectively represent what then becomes my sound, right? So some people say, oh, he's a neuro DJ. Oh, he's a liquid DJ. Oh, he's a this. Oh, I play all of them, right? But there's a balance that I'm looking for, a loudness, a clarity, a punch within all those sounds that I'm looking for. And I could pretty much identify it for the most part, in like half a second, whether or not a song reaches that threshold first. So because at the end of the day, especially with drum and bass, I don't want to be messing with the gain knobs. Most DJs don't. You want your tracks to be stable. So that way all you have to do is work on, what do you call it? Handle?
The handwork.
Handwork, yes. So all I have to do is work on my handwork. I don't want to have to say, oh no, this was hot on the level, on the volume. I just want to bring them in, and I just want to work the EQs, work the frequencies, work the levels, and just nail everything down. So, go ahead.
You said you could tell within a second. Do you jump to like the middle of the track somewhere or see what the middle sounds like? Or
I like to get the...
So just to summarize the question so we get it. His question was, in order to make that determination, do you jump to the middle of the track? How do you do it quickly? Because going through 10,000 songs is a lot of time, right? And obviously, you probably actually don't have that much time in minutes before the gig anyway, right? So
Correct.
You have to do some kind of strategy. What do you do to make that more efficient or quicker?
So I do use Beatport, right? And the beauty of Beatport is that if you're not a subscriber, it generally drops the clip, the sample of the song, pretty much in the heat of the song, like after the first drop, if you're lucky. So if I'm lucky, most of them will be right around there. But I do need the meat of the song, really, where after the drop, where everything's happening, everything's running, to really gauge, the production and the engineering, right? If it's at a level to where I can just mix. And does that answer your question? Okay.
Cool.
So, and when it's not, I do have to move it manually to, you can see the waveform, so I move it to, the thick of the song, so I can quickly gauge. So once I know, okay, number one, it passes that first test, and the next question, is it within my range of sounds? And then if it is within my range of sounds, then I'll spend more time, checking out the breakdown, checking out the second drop, checking out different parts of the song, if it passes those first couple of tests. But the first test, which is why I mentioned it earlier, because if it does not pass that, let's just call it industry standard, production and engineering test, then I'm pretty quickly on to the next one, because I could buy it and remaster it myself, but as Brian mentioned, it's like there's only so much time before that gig, and there's definitely work, life, family, and passion balance in all of that.
Cool. Okay.
You're welcome.
Natalie, what is your go-to source for finding music?
I was thinking about this earlier because I've been bouncing around. Honestly, Spotify has some really good features that I've been utilizing, especially if you find a song that you like. Spotify has a feature where you can go to artist radio or go to song radio, and the algorithm that it uses to create playlists similar to that, I find a lot of tracks that way. I also do SoundCloud. I listen to a lot of SoundCloud mixes. Mm-hmm. Better DJs than I post their set lists. Just kidding. Trying to think. Honestly, Beatport too. You can find a lot of artists have DJ charts that they do, especially off like their new releases. They'll make their own playlist. Also, if you find a track you like, it might be part of a compilation. So I'll search that compilation and find tracks that way. So I kind of bounce between those programs.
Cool.
So,
cool.
Yeah.
Okay. And then Holiday, how important is it to you that the tracks that you play out match your sound or your brand?
It's pretty important. It's important to have an identity through what you're mixing, because ultimately that's how we're speaking through our music. Sometimes in a very dark place, no one can really see you, but they can hear you. I always felt that if you can collect well, and you collect how you're actually storyboarding what you're going through, that's always kind of a really good place to come in from. And it's funny, I like the question before where you guys are talking about the sources of like where you guys collect your music, and that's so cool. It's funny because I haven't bought a track since summer, and I do this thing where I kind of like going to Bandcamp because it's not really easy to listen to stuff, but I like it because you're not jumbled by stuff. You're just listening to B-side tracks, and it's like, that's fascinating. What if I got that track and I gave it a little bump on the mids in Ableton, and I'm like, what would that sound like? So it is important to be very clear about your identity and how do you support what you're doing, but also kind of stay loose as well. Like, if you're not always going to get some primetime slot playing in, whatever, a festival, whatever. And sometimes you play your best, and you'll surprise yourself when you complete the thoughts and storyboard what you're going through. Even in the most private mixes that you make just kind of for yourself, you realize that you just kind of like revisited past memories, past emotions. And it's important to have that. It's healthy to have that. I encourage it. Do it. Do that.
Cool. Do any of the other panelists not approach it as so specific to their brand or sound and kind of explore or vary it a little bit more?
Do you want me to go first?
Please do.
I'm a true believer in that no matter what time slot you have, you can always find elements that make you, no matter where you play or what you play. I used to, because I love, I used to be primetime bangers, primetime disco, all high energy, so the opening sets would freak me out. I'm like, well, slow music isn't energetic or cool, but now I actually really love opening sets. And once I kind of found elements of my sound, I like really groovy bass lines, or I like catchy vocals. I mean, that can really be implemented at any time of the night. So once you become a little more open-minded, you'd surprise yourself what you can do, I guess. So I guess it's a little bit of both. But you never know if you can unless you try, I've tried opening with progressive sets, and I'm unlike these guys, progressive house is so out of my range, but I feel like I've played really good ones, so you just never know unless you try. So do it.
Nice. Just do it, guys. Yeah, we have a question from the audience.
It sounds like you have a lot of songs. How do you categorize these songs so that you can find them amongst from afterwards?
So to summarize, Desiree from our audience asked, sounds like you have a lot of music, a lot of songs on your computer or whatever. How do you keep organized in order to recall the ones that you need for a particular gig? And that was just to the panel in general?
For me, I go to primarily past sets, right? Other than that, I don't. So what that allows me to do is it allows me to start almost fresh with a few songs from the past that I know made it all the way from, selection to purchase to actually playing it, and then a giant crate of new stuff, right? And then from there, I can go anywhere. So I don't know what I'm gonna find again. It's like a brand new journey of searching and how everything's going to connect together and create a new journey compared to all the previous ones. So as far as organizing, for me, I have like a quote unquote Mr. Wendell collection, which is house, techno, melodic, progressive, melodic progressive, deep melodic, it's just like all that stuff. Some disco houses in there. It's like a bunch of different things within that space with a pretty broad BPM range as well. And then I have another one that's Taboo Collection. And it's just everything that is drum and bass, period. So that allows me again to bring in what I just picked up right before a set, pick up some bits from what I know worked, and have a journey of searching still after that.
I do want to add, if you use Rekordbox, I organize a lot of my music. You can add your own personalized tags. Mm-hmm. There's a little tab, I guess, like on the middle right. And basically you can type in like opening set, mid set, disco. And you can add as many of those tags to one track as you want. So once you pull down that box, I can be like, oh, opening set, funky. It'll come up with all the tracks I put those two tags on. So I have a lot of songs in my library, so it's a little overwhelming. It's very set based on my USB. My USB is a mess. It's like Groove Cruise 1, Groove Cruise 2, Groove Cruise 3, just for the mix. But just to organize your music, that's been like super helpful tool for me if you use Rekordbox. I mean, some people do that on their computer, but I shove all my music in one music folder. It's a mess. So Rekordbox has really helped me organize everything. It's a great program.
Cool. Great question. Cool.
Oh, yes.
All right. Another question for the group. Do any of you have like a ritual or a mental state that you have to get in order to start digging? Like right when you wake up kind of thing? Or is it like how do you approach that?
Light some candles. Set the mood.
I guess I'll start off on this one. So for me, it's more... First of all, I'll probably wait longer than I should to start practicing. But part of that is because I want to have everything that I'm going to select from, as close to the event as possible. So maybe 3 days before the event. It's more about just basically, quote unquote, doing the work, and to me, digging, first and foremost, like that is the essence of the work of what is a DJ. A DJ is a selector of music that he's then going to share, with as many people as, he or she can. So it's just about just doing the work. There's no candles, there's no time of day. It's like wherever I can get it in, I just jump in and just do it.
That's so funny. I'm so sensitive to like my environment. I feel like I have like a salt lamp candle. I have to clean my room. Even when I produce, it's like I don't know if it's like a weird OCD tick. All the laundry has to be put away. I just like sit coffee over there, water over here. Can't be the other way around. Just kidding.
Cool. Okay. All right, Natalie. When you get a request for like a specific genre or sound, not like a specific song, but like, hey, play something like this.
Something they can dance to.
Something they can dance to. And you decide that it's appropriate to fulfill that request, or you think it's a good suggestion. How to determine which actual track to play in the moment?
If it's a good suggestion, that raises my anxiety that I didn't think of it first. No, I'm just kidding. So you mean like if I was playing and someone's like, oh, maybe this, and I'm like, oh, that might work.
Yeah. And then how do you take that and dial it into a specific track?
You kind of want to see, I guess this would be good as an example. So if I'm playing like kind of slower, funky stuff and someone's like, oh, play some tech house, maybe I might slowly delve into like Jackin' House. Kind of like, you kind of got to build it up. It's kind of, I know some people just like throw it in, but I like to blend my music, and I like to have my sets kind of be like a journey, like a big wave. It's not like, oh shit, like what's happening now? It's like I want people to be like, oh, I just like was going. It's like when you put a frog in water and then you slowly boil it. That was a horrible example, but they like if you boom hot, it's like oh shit, but then you slowly warm it. It's like that's. I love that's the first thing that comes to mind. No animals are harmed in the making of this, but I hope that answers the question.
Yeah. Cool. Wendell, you just kind of talked about your process for digging. You kind of do a deep dive. It sounds like you just kind of knock it out. Do you also pick up tracks as you go over time kind of thing, or is it primarily the former kind of method?
So I do pick up some tracks, over time, and that's more the fun moment because that's when I'm not really preparing for a gig, and I'm just like on Instagram and somewhere in my feed, bam, like there's a song. Someone just put it out. Oh, SoundCloud link. Boom. Go to sound. Is it downloadable? Yes. Is it Wave? Yes. Hate MP3s. But it's like, that's part of it too. Finding or even listening to other people's mixes. And, in between. I do my best to listen to as many mixes, throughout the week as possible. But part of that as well, it's like listening to other people's mixes for my favorite DJs, favorite artists, friends, and just through that, certain songs will hit me as well. It's like, ooh, what is that? And figuring out what that is and, adding it either to one of my carts in Beatport or, maybe it's on some other person's site somewhere, maybe on Bandcamp. Like Holiday mentioned, Bandcamp is a great place. It does take a lot more work. That's why, again, I do it kind of mostly in between. There are some artists that I am following or subscribe to in some way, shape, or form, like on Bandcamp or on SoundCloud, and something will pop up from them. I'll check it out real quick. So that's part of the more fun side of it, as opposed to like that week before the gig where I'm like doing the work, Does that answer the question?
Yeah, absolutely. Cool.
Did I keep it under 3 minutes?
Just barely.
Cut. Wrap it up, beat.
All right, Holiday. As I mentioned before, you run an impressive collective of selectors called I'm Terrain. What minimum criteria with regards to track selection would you recommend to other people looking to form their own DJ crews?
The minimum criteria to forming a crew, is that?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I believe it would be. Honestly, it's very similar to how I actually put playlists together or sets, right? It's what is the atmosphere we're shooting for? How are we growing in our collection through our DJing, which actually, as DJs, we're collectors. Like, where are we in that process? And then how much commonality do we have with each other, and how much uniqueness do we have with each other, right? So it's interesting because within I Am Terrain, for example, it's like everyone's really dynamic. We're from so many different age groups, and it's really cool to see what everyone's kind of known for what they play in, but also the reputation they've developed from just their like lo-fi sound, for example, their B-side style. And I always find that fascinating when you're putting a band of united artisans together, right? Like, what's the commonality we have together? Everyone's kind of gets hung up on like, oh well, this person's really different than that. They play differently in this. I love seeing how I can actually take the lineup that we have, and I can just switch up the roster, and they will naturally just play off of each other's momentum because they're feeding off of what they're going through and what's happening in front of them and where they are in their collection. So when you move the positions around, everyone's kind of subtly like on their toes on like, how do I be not just by myself, but how do I support the next person playing? And that you start seeing that relation, and it's like, wow, my kids are growing up. This is so cool. I'm just kidding, but it's a funny feeling. It's like, this is really impressive. And it's sometimes I won't even play a set at a venue, or I won't put myself in a lineup just because I thoroughly enjoy seeing them shine and seeing them react to each other. You know, it's almost like watching 3 or 4 different chefs that you're big fans of, and you happen to invite them to your home. They're cooking in your kitchen. You're just like, this is amazing. You know, like that's that kind of moment for me musically. So yeah.
Cool. Love it. Love it. A little bit of a gear change. Is Shazam cheating?
No.
No.
That's that song identifier thing,
Yes,
right? Okay,
yes,
so
yes.
we're talking about the movie.
Oh, not
How
at
dare
all.
you pretend like you don't know? I
No, I
live
don't.
off Shazam.
Oh, you gotta use
I don't.
Shazam.
I have no shame. It
Oh,
does
yeah.
not matter what people say
Yeah.
because,
Oh no.
like I
It's
said
fine.
earlier, music is meant to be shared.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. It is a tool. Everything's a tool.
But
you know?
I do prefer people coming to talk to me. That way I can tell them, be like, and
Oh yeah.
That is
Oh, yeah.
we're
true.
fans of it too. We're like, here, you want it? This is what it is.
Exactly. No.
I'll definitely tell DJs at the end of their set. I'm like, oh, I totally Shazammed half of that. That was sick.
So, Natalie, kind of follow up to that. What if Shazam doesn't find the track? Is that frustrating? Like, how do you deal with that?
So if I'm really obsessed with it, I'll actually take a video on my phone just to get the audio of it. This is if I'm being like really crazy about it. I'll go home, try to Shazam the video itself. If like through Facebook, I'll play it on my computer because I'll message it to myself. This sounds like crazy. Like I feel like Charlie
song
from Always
stalking.
Sunny with like the board and all the red wires. Like if that doesn't work, I'll try. I usually try to get like if there's like a vocal hook or like a vocal, I'll type that in. See if like who the DJ was, which DJ was playing it. If it's a bigger DJ, I'm at a big show. Sometimes, like, what is it called? Like 1,001 track lists?
Yes.
Sometimes, if you're really lucky,
You'll see it there.
if you're at a big set and you just hear really good tracks, you can't find them, maybe like a month or a few weeks later, 1,001 track list will have that set. That's very rare. But
And that's
very awesome.
because people in the community are filling those out, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. But sometimes I'll be like, oh, you know, tech house song that like says party, well, I don't know, something like put like the little vocal phrase in. A lot of the times it's hard. There's been times where I've listened to a mix, I've actually personally messaged the DJ, and I've been like, I need this. I actually did that. If you guys remember Rescue, you know, rest in peace. The first time I ever talked to him, I actually just straight up messaged him on SoundCloud. I'm like, this is like the best mix ever. Can I have a few track, like this track? He just gave me the whole set list.
Awesome.
He was really cool like that.
Awesome.
So sometimes if I'm really desperate, I'm like, please, like, so it depends how crazy I'm feeling.
That's awesome. Holiday, what DJs do you find to be expert selectors? Like, which ones do you look up to, or who are consistently, like, either in the same page as you or finding the really good stuff?
Ooh, that's a loaded question, man. Who do I admire? You know, it's a combination of some legends like Sasha, Danny Tenaglia, Max Graham, things like that. But honestly, it's amazing how when you follow producers as well, that just shines a light like so much more. And I will say this because back to the whole track finding, when you're trying to find tracks, like there's a guy whose name is Guy J, really, really great, like one of the legends of progressive. He'll play his set and they'll try to identify it in videos, but they don't because he hasn't even released it yet. He's just playing them out. But here's the kicker. Those tones and sound signatures, like I'll hear like the way a conga is used in like a very rhythmic tribal track, and I'm like, that's the shit. Yes, I need to think about that. And it's like, what is this? And then I'm so wrapped up in like, what is this? How do I find this? I forget that sound is what's actually kind of like what I'm really picking up on, or like a really funky bass line. I'm like, oh, I gotta keep it funky. This is nice to be hearing this. And then I just start a whole fresh new search of music and be like, let me just let's see if I can remember this tone or this registry and follow it. So sometimes it's you'll get lucky and you go to your really inspiring producers and DJs and they'll give you a clue of a tone to like, hey, go find some stuff like this. I didn't release it yet, but find something like this. Or you'll kind of find someone that you really look up to and be like, okay, cool. You'll find a playlist, be like, that's a really great set. And be like, you'll find certain producers that they're using and then you'll dive deeper. Honestly, it's always a mix of the two. It's always a mix of the two. So.
Right on. Kind of in a similar vein, question for Wendell is: are there any podcasts that you subscribe to where you are able to stay up to date on the latest releases that are also like pretty high quality?
Great question. So the main podcast that I do listen to and subscribe to is Underland Radio. Check it out.
It's a local crew based here in Orange County.
Right.
And they've been doing it for almost 3 years now, I think. Getting
That's
up
right.
there, right?
Yep.
And they bring in a lot of great DJs from the local community, some big names too. I think they just had Donald Glod on their show, and they just had Night Stalker on their show.
Indeed.
They've had you, Mr. Taboo, on it.
That's correct.
Yeah, so that's kind of the background of Underland Radio.
That's the main one I do subscribe to. I also subscribe to Hospital Podcast, Drum and Bass. What else is there that I actually subscribe to? Those are the main two that I really subscribe to. Other than that, I like to come across, people promoting their mixes, whether it be, on SoundCloud, like Natalie was mentioning, or on YouTube. YouTube is great. There's a lot of really, really, really good recordings, rebroadcasts, sets, everything in all the genres. So YouTube is amazing. One of my favorites of late was it D&B 360, right? They have amazing stuff for drum and bass. And that's pretty much it as far as like stuff that I really follow and check out and go to.
Cool. We have another question from the audience.
How do you get around all the copyright stuff on YouTube?
So to summarize the question, how do you get around all the copyright stuff from YouTube?
My stuff is taken off in 30 seconds.
He's speaking from personal experience. When he uploads stuff, it gets struck down.
Great question. So that is kind of another job in and of itself. And depending on what you're playing, you'll have to put more into that than maybe others. So like the more underground your music is, the less likely that you'll have to deal with something that is not only detected, but licensed, and at the same time, you're not allowed to put it up. So that's like your more like major label type releases. For example, in the drum and bass realm, there are certain tracks that are like part of a Virgin sub-label, let's say, right? So those types of things, like you cannot upload it. So one of the things that I heard recommended, I haven't done it myself, but I'll share it with you, is that if you have a playlist in mind, then take all those songs. If you have a DAW, digital audio workstation production software, just put them all together back to back to back to back, upload them, let YouTube run its algorithm on it, and then it'll tell you what you can use and what you cannot use. So if there's anything in there you cannot use, just pull it out of your playlist if your intention is 100% to get that up on YouTube.
Good question. Yeah, Holiday.
I love that you brought up the DAW because the DAW is kind of what I use a lot as well. And I'll explain that more in deep if someone asks me. But basically, in Ableton, to get around what you're talking about, have you guys ever thought about a song that you really loved? And either that scenario happens where it gets kicked off, but you always just were curious, like, hey, what does this track in C sharp sound like in G? You ever thought about that? Like, you would be like, oh, I'm playing, like, you playing guitar that you really love, a song you like, but you're playing off key, and your friend says, you're playing it off key, but it sounds cool, you know? Same thing. And I've noticed that when I tried to upload mixes, that a lot of our stuff doesn't get taken down. It's because we're constantly reconfiguring keys. Like, I'll play a song I really like, and I know it's in G, but I'll actually manipulate it a little bit, and I'll retune it. Not too much, nothing by 4 or 5 key changes, like round 3. Experiment with that. Like, take that song, put it in Ableton, do your adjustments, and if you look down in the bottom left, there's a tune button there. You could actually change the tune of it. Just like if you were, imagine you took a keyboard melody and you dropped it in a sampler, you can actually reconfigure that, like the old MPC 1000. You can actually change the key on that. Now you can do it to a whole song. So before I even get deeper in that, every single thought, every single emotion, every single song you've collected since we fell in love with music, they technically have infinite lives. Because then you could take those songs or something that you're really feeling, and then you go back instead of buying and acquiring. Well, of course, that's all stuff is great too. But I tend to reflect back on my old CDs, my old drives, and I'll start pulling tracks from there, and I'll rekey them so I can fill in that gap that was missing, or it's getting pulled down, or whatever. And you'll find some interesting things on how you're just approaching all of it, and you're not bound by constrictions. There's an obstacle, you're just gonna move around it, because the story's gonna happen, you know? So have fun with it.
To add to that, let's say you don't have access to a DAW, or it's pretty complicated dealing with that software. A lot of the players now allow you to do it on the fly live, right? So you can do key shifts or key changes live. So you can kind of cue it up that way, see if it works, change the key around. If it sticks, then you can actually bring it out. So there's options to do it with hardware as well.
Yeah, very good point.
Cool.
That's a great recommendation.
Yeah.
I haven't heard that one.
Yeah.
So that actually leads me to another question, but you kind of jumped on it, was what's one tip you've heard from the group that you would consider adopting? And I don't know, maybe it sounds like that's Wendell's. So that one's great. What about
one for me.
What about Holiday and Natalie?
A tip for...
A tip that you've heard tonight that you might consider adopting or adding into your own process.
I'm trying to think of like all the... I mean, that is really... the key change is important. I started a mix series myself, and I started a YouTube channel, so that's definitely a concern, like how much of it is going to get like taken out for copyright. So I definitely might check that out, for sure.
Winner, winner, chicken dinner.
What about you, Holiday? Anything that you've heard tonight that is like, you know what, I might try that.
I love the persistence of like how you guys describe how you guys collect your music and how you guys find music, you know, and it's just like, it reminds me I've got to do that more and like kind of come out of my shell, not so much regressing to past stuff, that I like how spirited you guys are about collecting and sculpting the sound, and so I love all that. Yeah, I need to stop living the past so much sometimes.
There's just so many places you can find and dig for tracks. I mean, there's even like Instagram pages. Like, there's this one called like Techno Bible or something. And they post like a silly video to like a track, but they'll list the artist in the track. So like, it's so random like how you can find stuff like that.
You know what's funny is I had that moment with the old PlayStation 2 game. This is complete. There's an old racing game called Need for Speed, right?
Oh, yeah.
And I'm like, they're playing that massive electronica sound. I'm like, yes. And so I figured I was like, what if, I know this is a game, but what if I put this in a CD player? It did it. It played it. It played all the soundtrack.
No.
Street Fighter games, Capcom games. Like if you throw them in a CD player or in your car, you could just jump tracks. I'm like, this is so cool.
That's awesome.
I gotta sample this.
Right on, right on. Okay. All right, our final question. It's kind of a big topic, is the topic of programming. So for our audience, or for people who might not be familiar with that term, program is the art of sequencing your tracks within your set, right? It's deciding the order and the flow. How do each of you approach programming your sets? And we'll start with Natalie.
I usually start a playlist. This is after I've downloaded all my tracks, so I'm just working with what's in my library and record box. I'll start a playlist and kind of go through either past sets or whatever my library and add to that playlist. Usually the first go around, it's like 4 hours worth of music, so I have to cut that down to one. So that's where it comes in. It's like, oh, like time 1, time 2, time 3. And eventually when I get to the final playlist, I'm just kind of chipping away. I like to wear my headphones because I feel like I hear kind of the balance of the track than it's coming out of my speaker. So whenever I'm organizing the the sequence of the tracks for the set, doing the headphones, and I kind of press kind of the meat of the song, and then I quickly go to the next one and see if it flows. I'm a big fan of mixed in key. If you guys know what program that is, yeah, most of you do. It's basically, for those that don't, you put your tracks through and it analyzes it and basically converts the key of it to 9A, 9B, 8. So it's easier to read than I'm not super good at reading musical notes, so it makes it easy for me. That's just a numerical scale. Basically, whatever sequence I have, make sure it's within at least 3 numbers. So if I have a 9A, it's better to have another 9A or an 8 or a 10. So you'll kind of want to be 1 or 2, maybe 3 apart. So that's definitely really important for my tracks. Other than that, it does kind of take a while, but there's always a minute where it kind of looks oh, finally I'm getting somewhere. Because sometimes it's just a jumbled mess, but it takes a minute for me. I mean, I don't know if my way is really the best way, but
Cool.
yeah.
Great. And what about you, Wendell? How do you program your sets?
So for me, it's more about energy in the movement of the song. So, where do I want to start that energy? Do I want to start somewhere more new school, something more current? Do I want to do an homage to a favorite of the past? And where does the energy go from there? As far as am I bringing up the energy, or am I bringing down the energy? And just with that alone, I can move through the different subgenres, that are the culmination of my sound. And based on energy, I can move through and create a journey. Especially with 4 on the floor, it's a little bit easier, because with that, I generally tend to let the tracks breathe or speak longer. Now, with drum and bass, it's both energy, but also timing. Timing is super, super important, because with that, I'm creating a journey, not only in energy, style, and subgenres, I'm also creating a journey of transition. Because depending on where I am in the journey, I might want a different type of transition. As in, am I going to let the intro of one song speak at a certain part of the set? And for other parts of the set, it's almost a flip to where I want to come in and out of it as fast as possible, to move the energy by timing and by level. So it creates almost like a 3D experience, journey through that set.
Great. Cool. And Holiday?
I think the way I enjoy doing preparations and things like this nature is one is just knowing what the assignment is, right? Whether you're creating a playlist for yourself, like for example, like I have a series I kind of put of mixes for myself. I call it continents. It's like soundtracks and mixes I would imagine myself being at. This is the concept. The other one of knowing what the assignment is, are you preparing a playlist for a set that's going to be like in January, that you're going to be like in Guadalajara or something, right? Like, you know, are you going to prepare for that? So knowing what the assignment is, diving deeper into that. Now, let's say that's actually now clear. Then you know what your leads are, right? So if you're playing, I'm just going to use a 2-hour scenario. If you've identified 3 leads and you put a lead track, like the strong leader track, right? That's going to be designated for the opening segment, the mid segment, and the final segment, right? I'm harmonic, and what I mean by harmonic is I'm guided by keys. So if I know something's in G minor, this is a fun little tip that I like using. And everyone says, "Oh, I don't have a piano." Well, you have a piano with you on your phone, right? So if I find something where I like that's in G, and I know that's in G, if I threw in a C, what would that sound like? Right? So imagine just 6 tracks or 4 or 6 tracks of C, 4 of E, and then 4 of G. We're talking 16 tracks. I do long mix and I play 12, 13 tracks every hour and a half. Just as an example, it's like, okay, so if I deal that out like that, and I understand what these songs are doing, I'm very clear on the energy signature of them, which you very well put, then you know the leads are, and the leads, you also know what key they're in. Now imagine if they were all facilitated and assisted, like there were tracks supporting those leads, and that led to the next chapter. Then you're just creating momentum. I identify that as momentum, is where there's a key register that is rhythmic, it's harmonic, it's guided by maybe just 3 keys, but powerful tracks in clusters. You're working in clusters, and there's always forward progress, hence progressive music. It's about momentum, moving forward. So that's how I kind of...
Awesome. Great. I love those answers.
Yep.
So...
It's great that they do talk about key, and key is important.
Yeah.
For me, I like to dance around the wheel as much as possible.
Yep.
But, you know, keeping everything moving along in key, using that Camelot code is super helpful as well, especially in digital. Digital is far less forgiving when you put 2 things that aren't meant to play harmonically than vinyl is.
Yeah. And one of the reasons that might be is because when you change the speed of the pitch of the record, it changes the key. So nothing is like guaranteed on vinyl.
Right.
And you can't control it. You have to match the beats.
Right.
So you just kind of accept whatever key. That's why harmonic mixing is kind of a relatively new thing that's been added to DJing because of key lock or master tempo.
Or a guitar tuner on vinyl.
There you go.
Yeah, but I mean, do you pull it out when you're in the mix?
Like at home, when I'm preparing.
But if you're in live and you're playing a gig, you know, you
I want to
match
see
it.
that.
Yeah.
I would pay to see that.
Excuse me, when you pull out my ear.
Obsessive about the sound.
Cool. Okay. Well, now I would love to turn the floor over to the audience. Is there any tips or techniques that you do when you dig or program or sequence or any of those things that you'd like to share? And then go ahead and take this one.
A recommendation that was made to me regarding Bandcamp is that you can look at the people who support artists you like and start following them and seeing which tracks they pull and which tracks they support, and you'll get a lot of new music that way.
Great suggestion. Anyone else want to share anything?
I sometimes use SiriusXM. I mean, you know, it's kind of super old, but you know, they have like 3 or 4 electronic stations, and they actually have some pretty good stuff for all different genres. So I found some good stuff off that. Then use Shazam while listening to the radio type of thing.
There you go. Thank you.
Anybody else want to share any? We got one back there. By the way, our audience is pretty much all DJs. So there's a lot of good techniques here.
What a coincidence.
All right, so I guess continuing with the Bandcamp thing, on Bandcamp you can follow tags, and I think on probably like SoundCloud and stuff you can too. I don't know, I don't use SoundCloud a lot, so do that. And even on Bandcamp, the tags get just really deep and obscure, so if there's just like some weird deep and obscure tag you like, just follow that, and then on your feed it'll show continuously new tracks from that genre or subgenre or tag or whatever.
All right.
Great tip.
Totally. Oh yeah.
Great tip.
Yeah.
I didn't know about that one. Very nice.
Excellent.
Very cool. Very cool.
Yeah, pass the mic.
Steal it really quick. I just want to. Oh shit, is this on? Hello? Yes. Okay. Also, record pools. There's genre-specific ones. There's some where it's kind of all genres. It's basically you pay like a monthly fee, and like every week or so, or by like more than a week, once a week, like they'll post a bunch of basically a bunch of tracks, and it's almost like digital digging. So that's another one. I have a list of some on my phone if anyone's interested. I just signed up for a good one. I forgot the exact name, so I did it yesterday because my boyfriend has a bunch of them, and he's old school, so he has hip hop ones, disco house, but those are really good for finding tracks. There's a lot of underground artists in those too. So.
Cool. And just to kind of add to that, record pools back in the day, you would subscribe to them through the mail, and then they would ship you records, and you would go through them. Sometimes you'd have to fill out little cards that tell you the feedback, and then you would send some back, and then sometimes you would keep them. And if you've ever come across a record that says for promotional use only or for DJ use only, it was usually because of a record pool. So it's interesting to see that same concept live today in the digital space, where all of the difficult stuff is gone. Right now they're just sending you links to download tracks, and then you have them, and it's easy, it's seamless, and it's free for them to distribute, virtually free. And it's whatever subscription or whatever it is for you to get those tracks. So it's a great tool if you trust their taste or that label for the kinds of stuff they're sending you. Otherwise it could be a waste of time, but it really depends on if you align with what they're sending. You
kind of gotta get recommendations for them. I've definitely tried some in the past where I never found anything good, but some it's once in a while, some it's every time there's at least a few tracks, so it's worth it. Yes.
Nice.
Cool. All right. Any more things from the audience? If not, are there any questions that the audience has for any of our panelists? They covered everything tonight. Excellent. We are good. Oh, we got one question. Can you pass that one back?
Yes.
This is kind of on the other side of the ballpark, but let's say, someone hands you a USB stick and tells you to DJ with it. What is your strategy there? I don't know why I thought of this question.
Security!
It's just completely different than everything you guys were talking about.
That's fun.
I've actually had that happen to me. It's you want to be polite, but as a DJ, you should never do that to someone else. So if someone did that to me, it's hard for me to not be kind of dude, fuck off. What are you doing? This is not about you right now. It's about me. So
if it's some type of challenge or something, as far as
I challenge you to a duel.
That's what's going to happen before you get there type of situation.
If they gave me a USB after my set and maybe it had their own tracks on it, hey, check out my music, totally different. Anyone that does that should be shunned.
I must say I was offered that recently only because, as I mentioned earlier, the CDJs were not linked. One of the ports was broken, and I didn't show up with 2 USBs. Because who does that today?
Always gotta bring redundancy.
The USBs I get, they're very specific, they're very fast, and when I got it, it was basically like the last one. One way or another, it's like that was the first time I've experienced that in years that the CDJs were not linked. So the DJ before me was super awesome. He was like, well, he was playing house, 4 on the floor basically. He was like, well, I have some drum and bass on my drive if you want to play it. I was like, no. However, I did say, how about this? You play that deck, I'll play this deck, and let's just go for it. And that's what we did. And it was, it was random, it was interesting, but at the end of the day, it was fun. And the show went on, right?
That's awesome.
At least he was the DJ, though. What if like a complete random stranger was like, hey?
I sent him a link to Pioneer and say, go get your gear and go at it.
That's so crazy. I always have a backup because I have crazy anxiety. And I've had like those DJ dreams where like your USB like explodes or something, like as a bomb. Like I'm like anything could happen. So you've never had a problem where your USB like didn't work or anything, or I've had like the emergency loop of death.
No.
Oh,
I did have
those are the worst.
I did have once towards the end of a set, like the songs were not loading. It was like set went great. It was towards the very end. It's like actually I did extended set because the DJ after wasn't there, so I was just extending the set and tracks just stopped loading. I was like, what's going on here? Conveniently enough, there was other DJs on the stage, and they were like, hey, let's go back to back. So let's go back to back. So we just kept going, and we ended up switching into other genres, yada, yada, yada.
If it's extended anyway, that's kind of fun then, right?
But it was just one folder. So when I actually switched genres, went into another folder, like those were playing fine. So it was the strangest thing. But yeah, except the drive I have though now is like it's pretty precise and very fast.
Which one do you use? I'm like, I want to know.
What
Show
do you
me.
use?
It is
Oh man,
the
that's-
Flash Voyager GT, made by Corsair.
Wow.
Yes,
Whoa.
yes,
Product placement.
very
We accept all kinds of sponsorships.
right.
We are a nonprofit.
I'm on this one right now.
Oh, nice.
Is that a USB?
Yeah.
That is a USB.
Oh,
It's
yours
a
are way
Seagate.
cooler than mine.
It's a Seagate
Okay,
drive, but it's
okay.
made it from like an old vacuum tube.
Nice.
Does it light up when you plug it in?
It is.
That's awesome.
It does. Yeah.
Oh, that's really cool.
That's like some steampunk business.
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah,
I'm
man.
like, hey, Christmas is coming
I
up.
like that.
There's a gerbil inside that reads your data for you.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Cool. Well, I think that pretty much wraps up everything. Thank you, everybody, so much for being here. Thank you to our wonderful panelists. And thank you to the Pizza Press and Mimi for hosting this tonight. I think it went pretty well, and I had a great time. So thank you, guys.
Yes.
And thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, guys.